I was in Asia, major sovereign wealth funds there, major investors are very interested in coming here.
Mark Carney has revealed how he's going to be enriching himself here. Welcome back to Moose on Loose. My name's David. Today with Mark Carney's budget, digging through it, we can see how he's going to be funneling the money of taxpayers, funneling the money of the world, enticing global funds, sovereign wealth funds into Canada to enrich his own funds. This is some seriously dirty dealings that we've got going on here. Let's jump into this. Finance Canada posting this. Major Projects Office will fast track these projects. What's happening here is Mark Carney, not only is he doing his net zero agenda, he's rolling it out. He's showing us how he's going to roll it out. See all these big projects? They'll be required to have a certain carbon, a certain green eco level to them, investment level.
The budget is being billed as one to provide investor certainty, and yet the removal of the emissions cap seems to be contingent on a strong industrial carbon price, scaling up of CCUS, and the reinforcement of the methane regulations, which of course industry has also called on Ottawa to repeal. So my question is, in the context of investor certainty, is Cabinet directing ECCC to continue its work on the emissions cap to track for 2030? And if not, what's the trigger point for ECCC to cease their work, again, to give industry that certainty?
Two things. First, Greg, are you bringing your daughter to work today? That's very good. Very good. Very good.
What? What is this? I don't know what's going on here. Is he trying to be rude or is he trying to be fun and cheeky? I don't get it.
It's a noble profession your father is in. And I would like to add everyone on our side, particularly the hardworking men and women behind me. So I'll answer your question, but welcome. Thanks for coming. What we've outlined in the budget is, and this is a basic approach that the government is entirely united behind. We're focused on results, and the results are to get emissions down, to make all our businesses more competitive. The O-Train helps get emissions down in Ottawa.
There's no proof that reducing emissions makes us more competitive. That's the problem. What we do have proof of, though, is carbon taxes makes life more expensive, makes everything more expensive. This guy cuts the carbon tax and now completely jacking up the industrial carbon tax to make sure he can roll out his agenda here. I think it's time for Pierre to start campaigning against the carbon tax again.
For commute. The work of Gregor Robertson, the Minister of Infrastructure and Housing in Build Canada Homes, helps get emissions down. People will have houses that are more efficient. They're cheaper to run. They'll have lower emissions. They'll have lower emissions when they're built. That all helps. So we've got an overall approach.
That doesn't make things cheaper. That makes it more expensive. These materials, these processes, and paying for carbon credits makes things more expensive.
It's looking at getting emissions down. And then when we look to your specific question, when we look at the oil and gas sector, it's how do we get emissions down in the production of conventional oil and gas? And there's several things that can be done there. Partly it's the methane regulations, as noted in the budget, which are moving forward. Partly it's deployment of at large scale carbon capture and storage as well.
At large scale, what does that do? Carbon capture literally does nothing valuable for our society as other than sucking out carbon. We're not selling it. We should be increasing companies and businesses and sectors that produce money in Canada. What produces the most money in Canada? Oil and gas. Critical minerals is becoming a big thing here. We should be pushing hard on that. Nuclear energy. This guy wants carbon capture because he makes money off of it.
There's other factors that can come in here, but it's those investments, those steps that get the emissions down. And as they move forward, then the emissions cap becomes less relevant. Yeah, becomes less relevant. We explicitly say that in the budget. But that depends on having those measures in place and people moving forward on that.
Right. So I'll ask again then, is the Cabinet directing ECCC to continue its work?
The Cabinet doesn't direct. Cabinets don't direct departments.
Is CCC continuing to work towards tracking for 2030 on the emissions cap?
We're working on a...
Carney just snapped there, interrupted the reporter. Didn't like that question.
We have a strategy, a climate competitiveness strategy, which the broad strokes are outlined in the budget. You'll see more from the Minister of Environment and Climate Change in the coming weeks on that. And the strategy is focused on getting emissions down, making Canadian businesses more competitive, saving Canadians money.
Yeah, that's not going to save us money, though. Whenever he snaps, he's basically telling us where the sore spot is and where reporters should be pushing harder on. Unfortunately, most of these reporters not asking all that great questions. We've got a couple of good ones here today. M. Brandt posting this one, mobilizing capital for transition to net zero. This is from the budget. Canada has the resources and talent to develop technology that can deliver low carbon energy. As the global demand for low carbon goods and processes rises, Canada's new government is seizing this opportunity to mobilize public and private capital that promotes investment in sustainability to accelerate the flow of private capital into sustainable activities across priority economic sectors. Budget 2025 reaffirms the government's support for the arm's length development of a Made in Canada Sustainable Investment Guidelines, also known as taxonomy, by the end of 2026. These investment guidelines will become an important voluntary tool for investors, lenders, and other stakeholders. They're making this voluntary at the start. They're going to set guidelines, making companies, making investments, green bonds. It mentions green bonds in here, sustainable bond format. What's going to happen here is Carney's going to roll this out as voluntary at first. He's essentially putting up the barriers like you have on a downhill skier in the Olympics. They got to stay within those barriers. They're going around the thing. They can't go beyond that. He's setting those barriers, and then he's going to move the barriers in tighter and tighter and tighter until the skier can only go one place. That's his net zero agenda. So what's going to happen here is he's going to slowly over time force banks, big investors, pension funds to have a certain percentage of eco-green investment. And on top of that, he's going to make it so companies have to have a certain carbon level, their carbon footprint. And if they can't reach that carbon footprint, they can buy offsets. They can buy carbon credits to get them to that position. Of course, Brookfield already positioned as a world leader in this, and Mark Carney invested in Brookfield and Stripe Climate. He's going to get rich off this, but he's actually going to get even more rich off of the green bonds and slowly guiding and eventually forcing big capital into green investments. So investors come in and they buy a green bond from the government. They'll get a yield on that. That money will then go to priority green companies. Mark Carney obviously has a list of them here because it'll be ones from Brookfield and other ones like this that will get easy access to lower interest money to build their businesses. There's mention there too of having zero tax on green projects. I believe David Cochran mentioned that comparing America at 12% tax, we would have 0% tax on essentially writing off new buildings, all that if it goes to green tech, because then that further pushes everything towards these funds that Mark Carney has. He's got a $5 billion fund here that he gets a back-end kicker off of. He's also got these two funds, the Brookfield Global Transition Fund 1 and 2, $15 billion and $10 billion. So all in, he's got $30 billion of funds that he makes money off of.
Very important, I would think unprecedented, changes to the tax system to incentivize business investment, the productivity super deduction, which is there, which can be stacked alongside investment tax credits, which are confirmed and extended across a whole suite of clean energy. That catalyzes the broader investment.
How this works is Brookfield will take a percentage. We don't know the numbers, but say 2% every single year on these funds. It doesn't matter how well they do. If they perform poorly, if they do well, they always take 2%. 2% of $30 billion is $600 million, but they don't want them to do bad. They want them to do well, because what's going to happen, say the investors of the $30 billion, after they get their money back, $30 billion, if they grow the fund 100%, then after that, there'll be an 8% hurdle rate. It's essentially the investors will get 8% of the profits up front after they get their money back. And then after that 8%, they'll split the rest with Brookfield, say 80% for the investors, 20% for Brookfield. So Brookfield wants these funds to do well because they make a ton of money off them. And the easiest way to have these funds do well is if you slowly change the guidelines of a country, then force all the investment into these funds. That's what they're doing here. This is how Mark Carney's going to get stinking rich. You've got the carbon credit system, also with Stripe Climate, forcing companies to buy those offsets. Combine these things together, and Mark Carney, his $400 and something thousand salary a year, it's peanuts. It's absolutely nothing. Because you look at a $30 billion fund and say they get 100% return over 10 years. And after that, Brookfield starts making money past that 100% investment after 8%. Keep in mind, they'd be collecting $600 million a year in just managing the fund, the 2%. You would start to hear alarms going off because there's so much money being made off of taxpayers' money. I mean, you got to remember here, Ontario Teachers Pension Plan money. They're hurdling money into these funds to make money off them.
Mr. Speaker, of course we are always listening to Canadians. What I would stress to the honourable member is that this is a budget that invests historically in climate competitiveness in this country, in getting Canada to net zero by 2050, and making sure that Canada remains a leader in the worldwide fight against climate change. I would invite her to compare us to any country around the world, especially our neighbours to the south. Put this in perspective and understand, and as I know she will, that this is an historic effort on an historic issue, and it's an historic budget, Mr. Speaker.
So after that investment's paid back, say Brookfield makes 10% on this fund, which is $3 billion on $30 billion. The investors would get the first 8% of that, $240 million, leaving $2.76 billion. And of that, Brookfield would get 20% of that, or $552 million in a single year, plus their 2%, $600 million. So then they would make in 1 year $1.1 billion. And this goes year after year. So the more money Mark Carney can funnel into these funds that he gets direct benefit off of, which we know from his disclosures here, it shows right here, notional long-term incentive plan in the Brookfield Global Transition Fund. He has 3 of these funds. We don't know what his percentages are. Based on estimates, Carney would get roughly 15% or $82 million per year off of that fund. So are we starting to understand how Mark Carney is going to make money here? He is using our money to get stinking rich. And that's just from those funds. That's not the carbon credit system or his stocks in Brookfield Corporation, Brookfield Asset Management, or any of these other companies he's invested in here. It's possible Mark Carney's already in the billionaire club. Maybe he wants to be in the multi-billionaire club. All I know is after taking a peek into that budget there, I'm feeling sick.
Around the industrial carbon pricing, there was some language in there that admittedly I'm a bit confused about. I'm hoping, considering this is kind of in your tool, your sandbox, you can help me out here. There's some vague reference to how we're going to consult with the provinces and territories about strengthening the industrial carbon price, specifically around when the federal backstop goes in place.
Yep.
We've seen those changes around a consumer carbon price, getting it down to the price of zero, effectively killing it. Are we going to see something similar? What assurances can you give to... what assurances can you give to Canadians, to members of your own caucus, that these changes, that these consultations with the provinces and territories won't lead to an immense weakening of the industrial carbon price?
The assurance is in the budget where we talk about strengthening the industrial carbon price and strengthening the backstop. And there's various ways to do that. And as you probably know, is that different provinces have different carbon pricing approaches, different carbon markets in some cases. In some cases, those markets, for example, are very liberal, if I can use the term, in their credits that are provided, and so the effective carbon price, there's a big gap between the effective carbon price and the backstop price.
He just said it. The credits provided. This is his agenda. He finally said it.
There's ways to work on that, and we believe in cooperative federalism, so we don't just say by fiat this is what you're going to do. We work with the provinces in order to, as I say, to tighten the system.
Can I just get clarity on one other thing? I think during the campaign, maybe during the leadership campaign, there was talk about a carbon border adjustment mechanism. I didn't see that in the budget. Maybe I missed it. Is this still something that you're pursuing?
Look, the issues around carbon CBAM. First thing, the carbon border adjustment mechanism. Pardon me. The fact that we have an industrial carbon price will provide us market access for countries or jurisdictions, the European Union being the obvious one, that put in place a carbon border adjustment mechanism. So it is important. There's lots of reasons why it's important to have an industrial carbon price, but one of the reasons why it's important is for market access. And if we are diversifying, as we need to do, if we've taken one lesson from the experience of this year, it's that we need to diversify our markets abroad. It's an important component. There's a question whether we put in place a carbon border adjustment mechanism. It's something we're looking at, but it wasn't a budget initiative to do that. Thank you.
He's basically saying we're going to change our entire economy so we can trade with the EU, which we basically don't trade with hardly at all. Now, the reason why he doesn't support the carbon border adjustment here, which I've mentioned right here, CBAM compliant, because this is not going to work in his favor. What this does is puts a carbon tax on anyone importing things into Canada and makes sure that all products have to be at a certain eco-green level, otherwise they get tariffed. But Mark Carney wants big investment from either companies, countries, or pension funds flowing into Canada because he's putting in this new taxonomy funnel that will funnel the money into his funds that he has set up. These are the biggest green funds on earth, and he gets a cut of that. He gets a percentage after investors get their money back from these funds. So he wants billions of dollars flowing into these funds. He wants these funds to grow. He wants big percentage increases on these, and then he gets a percentage cut of that. We don't know what the percentage is, but he's likely to make tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars by using all of Canada as his funnel to boost these funds to make himself rich. This is beyond dirty. This is some sinister garbage going on here. So by putting on the CBAM program here, the carbon border adjustment, that limits the amount of money coming in to boost his funds that are already set up with Brookfield.
Which probably hasn't had the attention that it should. investment tax credits for clean energy. The earlier questions around climate competitiveness, absolutely right, because that also goes on top of that, adds to the tax competitiveness there. There is tremendous interest internationally in what's going on in Canada. I was in Asia, major sovereign wealth funds there, major investors are very interested in coming here. Investors in the Gulf, same thing, investors in Europe, investors more broadly. And that's on top of the fact that we have more than $2 trillion of institutional capital in this country, and the pension funds who make their own decisions on how they're going to invest, but we're creating a better investment environment for them.
Thank you, Prime Minister.
You just said it. Sovereign wealth funds, big Qatari money, pension funds, government funds. He wants it all. He wants it to boost his funds in Brookfield to make himself rich. Brookfield gets rich, he gets rich. Canada gets the crumbling, awful economy with this net zero green garbage that doesn't actually help our citizens. Clearly, Evan Solomon was sent over to do this. Here he is with Saudi Arabia's Minister of Investment. Grip and grin. Here's Evan Solomon meeting with the Qataris. They're trying to bring over this big money, push it into green funds, and Mark Carney gets rich. I don't even know if these liberals understand what Carney is doing here. They're just happy to get their $200,000 or $300,000 a year salary, and that's it. Regardless, these policies are and will continue to increase the price of food. We've got the food professor here saying that the industrial carbon tax does increase the cost of food based on 2 studies they've done.
And since the publication of both of our studies, because we published 2 studies, 2 papers, the gap between wholesale prices in Canada versus the US, food wholesale prices have actually increased. So, and we believe that one factor driving this is the carbon tax. And so we're very concerned. And of course, we're looking at food prices into 2026 right now with Canada's food price report. And again, we don't, at this point, we feel that we actually may provide Canadians with some bad news for 2026. But we are expecting food inflation to continue to be a problem moving forward.
Mark Carney's rampant spending is not going to help that. It's going to make it worse.